Hi, it's Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky, and I'm back with my plans and pans. Well, let me start with the good news. Economic disaster has been averted, thanks particularly to the incredible work of President Joe Biden and his negotiating team that stopped the Republicans who for months have been threatening to shut down the entire economy, harm millions and millions of Americans personally, and said that they were not going to give up until they got their way. Well, they didn't. By and large, I would say a large percentage of what they were trying to do actually was stopped because of this negotiation to make sure that there was no default of all the bills that were due in this country. Now, I have to tell you, I think I'm the only member of Congress who went down during the debates with a copy of my Constitution of the United States. The 14th Amendment makes it very clear that you can't threaten the faith and credit of the United States of America by failing to pay the bills. But nonetheless, the Republicans persisted until the president in particular was able to come up with a compromise. The Republicans, under the leadership of Speaker Kevin McCarthy, had actually targeted Social Security, Medicare, and in particular Medicaid, which mostly goes to people who need help because of low income, children, people with disabilities. They weren't able to do that. Nor were they able to undo the great work that was done in the last session, passing the Inflation Reduction Act, which actually puts in billions and almost a third of $1 trillion into the climate crisis, which is so important. They were unable to do anything to stop the infrastructure bill, which most of them voted against, and the Chips and Science Act, which would create the chips that we need to make sure that the supply chain is working properly. And most of them actually voted against Chips and Science. Those bills were untouched. But I wanted to let you know that once I was assured that there would be no default, that the votes would be there to protect our economy, I made the decision to do what is essentially a protest vote and voted no. And here's why. It is not okay for the Republicans to threaten to put the entire economy of the United States and probably the world into complete disarray, into collapse. It's not okay to mess around with the SNAP program. That's the program that provides food to people. Now, they said that it was important to have work requirements, which, by the way, we already have. That people who want to get help with nutrition, which is about $6 a day is the average SNAP benefit, that they wanted to raise the age to 54 years old. Who was sitting around in an office and deciding, aha, we're going to make people between 50 and 54 years old that want to get any help with their putting food on the table, we're going to make them work another 4 years, which is really hard to even monitor, let alone it's really cruel to require that. The bill also expedited the passage of the Mountain Valley Pipeline, which would add lots and lots of fossil fuel emissions into the atmosphere. The bill also takes a significant amount of money away from the Internal Revenue Service, money that is very much needed to make sure that the wealthiest tax cheats actually are going to pay their fair share. And they also made sure that defense spending, and the Defense Department is the only agency that can't even pass an audit. There is the estimates of billions of waste in the defense appropriations, and yet that money is much greater than was left for the non-defense spending. That's education, that's healthcare, that's all the things that really affect everyday families. That money is far less than what is going to the Defense Department. I had a problem with that. I have for a very long time. Really overwhelming to me is the hypocrisy saying that what we really have to do is cut spending. While during the Trump administration, they approved $2 trillion in tax cuts, the vast majority that went to the wealthiest Americans. Now, Joe Biden has been proposing for a long time and put in writing that he wanted to see that we raise taxes on the wealthiest, corporations as well as individuals. And what we know is that during the Biden administration, there has been reduction in the deficit and the debt of the United States. We've seen it go down under President Biden. So the hypocrisy of saying we have to go after people who get food stamps and we have to make sure that we're going to take money away from the Internal Revenue Service. These are so hypocritical. Last Thursday, along with my dear friend and colleague, Congressman Chuy Garcia, we hosted a rail labor roundtable. The reason that we had this roundtable is at the beginning of May, rail workers from all the different unions that serve our rail transit saw a 5.7 cut in their benefits, in health care and in the retirement benefits. Now, understand that the federal government does not pay for these benefits. Taxpayers don't pay for these benefits. All that happens is that the federal government administers the payments that they get. And so this is a really devastating cut for these people who are working very hard on the railroad. And it's pretty unique. There's no other situation. Rail workers are uniquely targeted for this kind of decrease in the benefits that they have been inspecting. So at the roundtable, we were focusing on legislation that I have just introduced called the Railroad Employee Equity and Fairness Act, or the REEF Act, that we are going to work very hard to get not only all the Democrats to support, but it's already got bipartisan support, and that we're going to be able to get more Republicans on the legislation to establish some fairness for these railroad workers. I'm looking forward to advancing this bill. Last Friday was Gun Violence Awareness Day, something I think most people are aware of, but what we have to focus really to do is to stop all this gun violence, the easy access to guns, legislation that makes it absolutely possible for people without any background checks to get guns. Coming at the end of this week, there will be a vigil of people who have been the victims, their families of gun violence at the Capitol. And I'm looking forward to participating in that. You may not be aware that the Memorial Day weekend in Chicago was the absolute worst that we have seen in the city, with 53 people shot and 11 killed in that single weekend. So we know that it's the mass shootings, but it's also the so-called everyday shootings that we see here because of the easy access to guns. We already know that the majority of Americans do think that assault weapons should be banned, that weapons of war should not be in anybody's hands. It is also such a big problem for us here in Illinois, where we have excellent legislation to prevent gun violence, but we are surrounded by states where the easy access to guns make it simple to bring them across the border. So we need to protect our families. We need to protect our children. Guns are now the single highest cause of death in the United States of America for children. So we have a long way to go. And this is Pride Month. Happy Pride Month. This is the time when we celebrate all the achievements and contributions of the LGBTQ plus community. And we also pledge to make sure that the kind of attacks that we have seen and the kind of discrimination that we have seen must be eliminated from our culture and from our laws in the United States of America. As I think many of you know, I am the proud grandmother of a transgender young man who is doing absolutely fabulous work as a teacher and living in safety, but not so for all in the transgender community. So we certainly have some work to do, but it is also a time for lots of celebrations. You're going to see many of them in the streets and in neighborhoods and in people's homes. So my best wishes to the LGBTQ plus community, and wish them the best on this wonderful month designated to celebrate them. And with that, I hope you are having a great week, and I look forward to seeing you for my plans and pans next week. Thank you for watching my video. Make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel and follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, where my handle is @Jan Schakowsky.